Hello and welcome to the Monday show via the Everything is Black and White podcast. Newcastle United deservedly got a point against Manchester City on Saturday at St James's Park, and it could have been all three. I'm Andy Musgrove, joined as usual by Aaron Stokes, and we're here to look back on that performance against City and whether that's the real Newcastle United that we saw. That and plenty more to come in today's show. Let's get on with it. Aaron, happy Monday. How we're keeping? Feeling chipper after Saturday's game?
I tell you what, it is good to come on this podcast finally for the first time this season and actually feel like we can talk about not only a good result but a good performance. And as I said on the podcast that I did straight after the game on Saturday, best performance of the season. Everybody I've spoken to has agreed. I don't think anyone's going to say anything different. And they needed a big performance against the runaway leaders, and they delivered.
I'm going to say, not only was it the best performance we saw this season, it's the best performance since the game against Spurs at home last season, which they won 5-1. Would you agree?
I mean, you've put us on the spot here because I can't really remember who they played at the end of last season, but yeah, we'll go with it.
We had Brighton, Manchester United, Brentford.
Yeah, look, great performance. I think Newcastle really could and should have probably won that on Saturday, which goes to show you how well they did play. And as I say, how refreshing is it, Andrew Musgrove, in the words of your good self, to be sat here actually looking forward to an episode. I mean, we always look forward to the episodes, but the last couple of weeks have felt a little bit like, do we really need to do an hour?
Groundhog Day.
An hour of.
I mean, I'm happy to say I'm happy to be eating my words because you all know what I thought was going to happen against Manchester City on Saturday. And I wasn't doing it for the reaction or anything like that. I genuinely thought it would be 4 or 5-0. Because of the way they played against Fulham, the way they played up to that Fulham game as well. I was terrified. But in many ways, it felt like a win on Saturday. I know they didn't get the win. They could have, as you said, and we'll get into the chances they had to get all 3 points. But it really did feel like a win leaving the ground. I'm still on a high thinking back to that game. We've just watched the highlights back in the office in preparation for this episode. And there was so much right about Newcastle. In fact, there was very little wrong, but it did feel like a win.
Yeah, it did. And I think, as I said, everyone that I've spoken to sort of afterwards hasn't really had any negatives to say. It's as if they did go and beat Man City. I was the same as you. I mean, I am usually the most confident person when it comes to Newcastle United playing at home. As the week drags on, the closer we get to kick off, the more confident I am that they're going to win whenever they play at St James's Park. But even the eternal optimist in myself was dreading Saturday just a little bit. Newcastle at home, we're always going to have a chance. Pep in the build of the match spoke about how incredible St James's Park could be. But even then, I thought it was going to take something monumental, not only to get a result at City, but just to see something drastically improve from Fulham, because that was such a bad performance and there was so much wrong with it. To then go to the complete other end of the scale and barely put a foot wrong against the best team in the league, arguably the world. Eddie Howe and his players deserve massive credit for that.
They do. And like you said, they needed a response from that Fulham game, 3-1 defeat at Craven Cottage. Everything that we criticised them for against Fulham, and to be fair, in the first 5 games of the season, has been improved on. They were organised, they were disciplined, and the effort was there. And I'll mention later on the show how I'm not going to let myself get too excited by it, but I want to read you this quote from Anthony Gordon, who, of course, got United's goal from the spot. And he told TNT Sports, "We've had a training week where everyone was kicking each other. You could see that everybody was not happy." Now, of course, United had the free week because the game against AFC Wimbledon was postponed. Yeah. We both said that we felt playing that game would have been more ideal than having a free run at City. Again, I think we're both happy to be proved wrong, sitting here with Newcastle United having picked up at least a point against City.
Yeah, well, I mean, as the week dragged on and after we did the podcast last week, it started to emerge, a lot of it from coming from behind the scenes, a lot of it listening to Eddie Howe on Friday, that there was a real big inquest on the training ground last week, not just between Eddie Howe and his players, but also the players internally were sort of having words with each other. Eddie Howe, we know, watches games back religiously, win, lose or draw. You suspect that Fulham one's the one he's probably watched more than most this season because of truly how bad it was. And look, we both thought that on paper, an easy fixture against Wimbledon, get the chance to get the result out of the system. They didn't need it. They just needed it, a good week on the training pitch, which we've all been talking about, haven't we? Newcastle only in 3 competitions this season. Less time on the playing pitch means more time for Eddie Howe to implemented on the training pitch. And you felt like everything they'd clearly been working on worked. The midfield was much better. The defence was well drilled. They clearly had a plan to stop Haaland, and they clearly had a plan going forward. And everything they tried seemingly came off.
Yeah, you could see the benefit of having the full week to work on a game plan. And there's something I want to pinpoint later on the show, in particular with Joe Linton's role on Saturday. But we'll start with the team sheet because it was quite interesting. Again, I think both of us said he'll play Kieran Trippier and he'll play Sandro Tonali. And I think actually it was probably the starting 11 that most predicted. But more than anything, I think just seeing Sandro Tonali on the starting team sheet was the boost everyone needed.
Yeah, and I mean, look, there's been so much clamour for him to play, and we've spoken about it in this podcast. Every single fan, whether it's on social media, down the pub, everyone's been crying out for it. And maybe now, with the benefit of hindsight, the fact he went off with cramp after 75 minutes, maybe Eddie Howe can turn around and say, "Look, I was right to just hold him back a little bit." The thing that we now need to talk about going forward, and it's something that I wrote about over the weekend. He can't go back. Bench him against Wimbledon if you want, but in the Premier League, I think that is your midfield 3 now. If they're all fit, it's proven it works. It's worked against the best team in the land. I think now you've got to step and you've got to stop tinkering with it in the middle of the park because they were so good on Saturday.
What I will say is I agree. I think in an ideal world, that is your midfield 3, but it was one game. And yes, it was against Manchester City. And yes, it worked so well. And as I'll say later in the show, I think people just need to put the brakes on slightly. In isolation, great point, fantastic performance. But
don't bring us down.
No. But what I'm saying is,
come on.
It only is worth the hype if they put that performance in against Everton and the teams that come in the league afterwards. It's the midfield 3 of Tonali, Bruno and Joe Linton, which I've got every confidence it's going to work going forward. But it is only worth the hype if, again, we see that against Everton and so on and so on. Like, I just think enjoy this result and performance in isolation, but let's not forget what went before, because there were still elements of that game individually where people were making a few errors and mistakes. And what I want to see is Eddie Howe and his team build on it and continue to build on Saturday, because if they go out against Everton and they revert to what they did against Fulham, then Saturday was, it's long gone in the memory.
But I think the way they build on that result on Saturday is by sticking now. Eddie Howe has tinkered and tailored and chopped and changed more than he has in the last 3 years. We don't know week in, week out who's going to be playing at right back. We don't know who's going to be playing at left back. That midfield 3 has changed every week. He hasn't yet got a solid set of front 3 either. And I think you're looking at that midfield. Everyone's been banging on, play your best players. And he's done that up front. He's fit Harvey Barnes in that team. He's moved Anthony Gordon up because they are the best 3 players in that position. And I think Sandro Tonali, Joel and Bruno are the best midfield 3, and it worked like a charm. You've got Bruno who sits, Joel is much better on the left, and Sandro Tonali looks really, really good on that right. There was some fantastic runs to the channel where he was really attacking Guardiola. He was doing the dirty work, tracking Grealish. That midfield 3 is the best midfield 3, and you need to make it work, and it worked on Saturday, and you need to now keep it going and let them build up this little cohesion, let them gel together, because we haven't seen it for, have we really seen them play together since the very, very start of last season?
No, I agree with you. It's time to
that was my point.
Rather
than getting carried away, I just want to see them be allowed to just start the next couple of weeks and just build this relationship between each other.
I don't think any Newcastle United fan looked at Saturday and could not have been anything else but excited for the future of the midfield and the way it worked. And we just have to see it continue to get better, which I'm sure it will do. I've got full confidence it definitely will do. And you're right, maybe Eddie Howe knows a little more than you or I or the rest of the fan base, because we were all calling for Tonali to be in. Why hasn't he been starting? But you could see as the game went on, he was clearly struggling. He goes off with cramp, and if you watch him walk down towards the dugout, he can barely lift his legs up because he's put the effort in, he's put the legs in. So we'll give Eddie Howe his due there and his credit, because he's made the right decision, I think. But if you look at the stats of Tonali, because we're hailing his impact, but if you look at the actual numbers, there's nothing too much to write home about, other than the passing, the percentage rate for his passing, 81%. That puts him joint 5th on the list in terms of those who started the game. Amazingly, 3 other players registered 81% as well. But his stats aren't particularly high or impressive. But what I think we saw was just his presence on the pitch, his footballing brain, his want to go forward, but also in the knowledge that actually it's not the worst thing if I need to pass sideways or go back. What I need to do is play the right pass rather than always trying to go forward. I think just having his influence on the pitch was the biggest difference. And as time goes on, as he gets fitter, as he gets more match fit, we will see those stats improve. But certainly a good foundation to build upon.
Yeah, I think the 2 things that stood out for me above all else for Tonali were how do I explain this? Is there a little bit of an air around him, a little bit of an aura? You know, when he picks up the ball, and this isn't a dig at Sean Longstaff or Joe Willock, but there's just a little different feeling. You can tell Sandro Tonali has played at the top level for his country, won titles in Italy. I think that's a little bit intimidating for opposition. And I think the second thing, Bruno and Joelinton are known as these big midfield enforcers who love a scrap, they love a bit of needle. But actually, I think Tonali is just as bad as them. You saw the way he went up toe to toe with Grealish, really trying to get in Grealish's face when he didn't need to. There was no shying away from that. And I don't think we've really thought about Tonali in that way, like we do with the other two.
Talk about him being quiet.
Yeah, he's this shy, and he's a very mild-mannered, reserved player off the pitch. But actually, on the pitch, he can be a bit of a warrior.
And it'd be interesting because I admit I didn't know anything about him before he joined. Whether someone who maybe followed him at AC Milan can tell us, did he have this bite in his game, or is this something that's come the last 10 months where obviously he's gotten out of bed a month ago and gone, what a waste of 10 months of my career. I'm going to have to prove a point.
I think that will have had an impact, definitely. And I think a lot of people have said, watching him now behind the scenes at Newcastle, he's very different to what he was when he signed. But I remember when Newcastle signed him in the summer of 23, and there's a video that started going viral on Twitter of him in the Milan derby in the San Siro, and an Inter Milan player goes down, and Tonali runs over and tries to drag the player up from the ground to his feet, and it sort of sparks a mini brawl. But you could tell there was a little feistiness to him, and I think that's what Eddie Howe's seen, and I think we're starting to see that. But I think, as we've said, just want to see more of it. If he doesn't start tomorrow, that's fine. I think you probably rest him after Saturday, but come Everton, I hope he's still in the starting 11 again.
I think he just looks really confident on the ball, and he looks assured. Sometimes when Sean Longstaff gets the ball, you can see his mind working.
He needs a second.
Whereas Tonali doesn't. He's just quick, and it's just the short passes between whoever he's given the ball to, and you can just see there's definitely a difference in level and ability there. And he is so quick when he chooses his man. What else I love about him is you mentioned the bite, but also the fact that there was times against Manchester City where he was very, very cute in winning the fouls, throwing himself to the floor, rolling about. The slightest of touches. I hate it.
We hate when if it was a City player doing it.
The top teams do this. Yeah. Jack Grealish does that. They know how to win a foul. They know how to make the most of it. Okay, we criticised Diaz for Sheffield United, but
Grealish got sent off here. Exactly. For Tonali would be.
Do you know what I mean? So I think sometimes Newcastle United have lacked that kind of know-how of how to do what the bigger teams are doing. We might not like it, but that's what you've got to do to get ahead. So Tonali definitely seems
the famous game management.
Yes,
isn't it?
Yeah, Tonali definitely seems to have that. A word for Kieran Trippier, as we said, back in the side there for Tino Livramento. I think a little bit harsh on Livramento. I think he's had a good start to the season, but I think in a game like that against Manchester City, as we said last week, you want that experience and you want that leadership, and he was acting like the captain without the armband. You could see the instructions and the directions given out to players in front of him. You could see him kind of urging Bruno forward with the captain responsibilities. And there was a really important moment where Fabian Schär very nearly lost his head with Jack Grealish, and Trippier comes over and pushes Schär away, not going to let him fall in that trap again. And that's what Trippier offers. He is a proper leader of men, a proper leader of that Newcastle United side.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I should just take this point in the show to issue a little bit of an apology to you and Trippier. Were you going to bring it up?
Is it the tweet?
It's the tweet.
There's always a tweet.
There's always a tweet. I'll read the tweet out because I've got it up here. So I tweeted this at 1 p.m. So the game was 30 minutes gone. And I tweeted, Tino Livramento was great, but having Kieran Trippier in games like this is such a boost for Newcastle United. Non-stop communication with his teammates and a great battle currently taking place with Jack Grealish. Now, that was on the 30th minute, and in the 35th minute, Kieran Trippier loses out to Jack Grealish, and Manchester City go and score the first goal. So, I'm sorry for jinxing KT in that one. But what I will say is that was the only real negative of Trippier's game. He got caught out, but he also won a lot of the duels with Grealish, and the luxury of being so close to the pitch and being so close to that right side in the press box is actually Murphy and Tonali and Trippier are the closest players to us. And before I actually tweeted that out, it was so noticeable that Trippier, when he doesn't have the ball, is just constantly marshalling his defenders. He's telling Jacob Murphy where to position. He's shouting something at Bruno and Tonali. And how many times did we used to say over the last couple of seasons, he improved Miguel Almiron's game so much? And I think he just does that with every player around him. And look, there's still debates to be had as to whether it should be him or Tino, but he's had a really tricky period the last year. His form sort of fell off a cliff. There was lots of speculation about him going in the summer. Big performance for him. He needed it. He delivered. And like we say, apart from that first goal, I don't think he really put a foot wrong. Really good performance.
He's another one that went off with cramp. I don't think you'll see him start or even feature against the FC Wimbledon. I think you will see Tino Livramento, who actually came on, and I thought he put a decent shift in as well. And again, it's a test of character with these players, because I think if you get taken out the side because you've had a bad game, then you hold your hands up and you say, yeah, well, fair enough. But when you've started the season as well as Tino Livramento has done, I mean, we talk about that Fulham game. He's probably one of the, we talk about the season as a whole. He's been one of those who's really impressed. I think he will feel a little hard done by, but he comes on the pitch. He knows he's got, I don't know how long it was, 15, 20 minutes to make a lasting impression. Then he'll be playing against the FC Wimbledon. So it was good to see him come off the bench and not have his head down and just say, you know what, I'm going to work really, really hard. But I'm glad you put that tweet up, because I was going to had a screenshot and I was ready.
I'll hold my hands up when I get caught out like that.
Well, you mentioned there the Man City goal. It didn't come against the run of play. I thought the first half was very flat. There wasn't much in it. It just came out of a mistake, and it's a warning about what these top teams can do. That if you do slip up like Trippier did, you're more than likely going to get punished.
Yeah, Trippier was found sort of wanting a little bit. He was a little bit out of position. I think he gets really unlucky actually, because he makes the tackle, but the ball just cannons off Grealish, and he's so far out of position. He was never getting back. Could Burn get closer to Guardiola? Maybe. I don't think Pope can do anything with the goal. But as you say, I actually think, when I was doing the pod the other day, I was trying to think of the chances that City had during the game, and actually, the only other one of note apart from the goal in the first half was a really, really half chance for Erling Haaland. There wasn't really a
a Kanji fire one wide off Tonali,
deflected, and Haaland obviously stung the gloves. But really, against a team like Manchester City, to restrict them to 2 or 3 efforts in the first half, it was a really
even in the second half
performance.
You had one save.
Foden had a chance late at the end.
Again, that was easy, and then that great save
from
Silva.
Pope. So
it kept them really, really quiet. And it was really, really impressive from Newcastle United. The response from Newcastle to that goal was good. No heads down, just pushed on through. And then Joe Linton very nearly got the team level right on the whistle at half time. I mean, it was a wonderful touch to bring it down, swivel and shot. And this is why Edison's probably up there with the world's best goalkeepers. What a save that was.
Great save. Yeah, great save, and a great chance to get level at, right on the stroke of half time. We've seen that with Newcastle at home this season. The heads don't drop to them. It was the same at Spurs when they conceded. They battled so hard against Southampton, and I think a lot of other teams 1-0 down at City, even if you're at home, that's curtains, isn't it? But Newcastle really, as we've just been touched on, they never really had a prolonged period in the game, apart from maybe 10 or so minutes towards the end where you really felt like they were sitting deep though under the cosh. And look, I mean, we haven't even touched on the big man yet. First time Erling Haaland has failed to score this season, which just goes to show what a monumental performance it was.
Another game against Newcastle, where he's not scored. It seems to become a bit of a problem for him, which we will take. We mentioned there Joe Linton, and I thought his performance was quite interesting. Defensively and physically, I thought he was absolutely spot on. And if you watch the game back, he was so important to disrupting Man City's game plan of exploiting the space between the centre-back and the full-back over there on the left. At times, he was filling in that gap, and it effectively was a back five, wasn't it? with Murphy,
Yeah.
Barnes, and Bruno and Tonali filling the midfield, which just closed off all the avenues for Man City to exploit. And they didn't have an answer to it. It was a clear game plan. And it worked so well, and it worked so well because Joe Linton was clearly told that's what you're going to have to do when they've got the ball, and he did it really, really well.
Yeah, he did. I actually thought coming on this pod we might have a little disagreement about Joelinton, but I think we're probably going to be on the same page. I thought Joelinton defensively was absolutely fantastic, as you say. I think the reason Lewis Hall had such a good game is because Joelinton did that role he does so well, where he offers so much protection, that sort of left-hand side of the pitch going backwards. I thought everything he did in the box was fantastic, but I just think on Joelinton, has he developed a little bit of the Sean Longstaffs? And what I mean by that is he just taken a second or two too long on the ball. There was 3 or 4 moments in that game, one of which Newcastle had a fantastic opportunity to break on the counter. Murphy breaks, he nutmegs someone, cuts inside, and Joelinton just loses the ball. And there was a couple of times like that where he did it, takes an extra touch, he needs an extra second to decide what to do with it. But to his credit, more often than not, he raced back, he defended well, he was heading everything clear in the box. But that's my only concern with Joelinton at the minute. He had a good game defensively. I'm still not sure
It's his first touch.
He's completely right.
I've got written down here that he couldn't trap a bag of cement.
Okay.
Because all this season, his first touch has just been lacking. And you mentioned there the chance later on in the second half, he actually traps the ball. My first thought was he's just going to try and put his foot on it. It's just going to go anywhere but where we need to go. But he actually traps it. And then you're right. He's thinking too much and he's tackled. And, he was clean through on goal there, really. He just needs to take a shot and it's on target at the very least. Then you had the penalty after the Anthony Gordon shout. Penalty. You had the Joelinton shout, which for me, I think was a penalty. But again, if you've been ultra critical of Joelinton, he's got to get the shot off before he allows Kyle Walker back in. And there were 2 or 3 other examples in a more dangerous area when it comes to Man City being able to attack, where again Joelinton's just given the ball away. There was one in the centre circle, there was another one a bit deeper in Newcastle's own half, and thankfully Newcastle dealt with it. One of those occasions, Joelinton got back and headed the ball clear, which is all fine, and we're sitting here celebrating a point. But on another day, it could have been very, very different. And I just don't know what the answer is. And I think that's why you'll see him actually play against the FC Wimbledon, because I think what he needs is a good performance. It doesn't matter who it's against, League 2 opposition. It really doesn't matter. He just needs a good 45 minutes to an hour to hopefully set him up for Everton.
But isn't that interesting that you say that? Because I don't disagree with you, but he was man of the match on the first day of the season. So you think if anyone in that team is going to kick on, I mean, he was fantastic against Southampton. He was everywhere when they had 10 men. And since then, I don't know, we've been watching a completely different player. But I don't know what the answer is.
It was a different performance. He was. We're sitting here praising his physicality and his defensive performance against City, and that's what it was like against Southampton. He was physical. He was knocking players off the ball. He was being the tank. Whereas the biggest criticism against City and the games prior to that come when he's trying to bring the ball down, and it's just bouncing off him. He just can't seem to keep the ball at his feet, and it is going to cost Newcastle. I mean, we saw it against Fulham. It cost Newcastle there when players were just losing the ball in silly positions. But Eddie Howe can't really do anything about that. That's down to Joelinton just being focused. And it's such a simple thing, but it's also probably the hardest thing to fix, because how on earth do you fix someone's first touch when they're getting paid £100,000 a week? We shouldn't be sitting here talking about it. So, I mean, it'll just click one day and you'll get that first touch back.
It's like when we spent all last season asking Miggy to use his right foot, and he's 30 years of age. If he hasn't learned now, he's not going to learn. But it's weird because Joelinton in the last couple of seasons has been sort of that ever-present where, rain or shine, he was always more or less pretty consistent. He'd always give you a 7 or 8 out of 10. When Bruno sort of went missing in games, Longstaff was dropping in and out of games. Joelinton was never really the one to do that this season for whatever reason. He's just, I don't know. I don't want to be too harsh on him because I don't think he did play that badly on Saturday, but I just think of all the players, I think he was the only one that I really took issue with a couple of things with. I think everyone else, was pretty much bang on.
I think the point about him being ultra critical, he will be his biggest critic, because if you watched him closely on Saturday, after that chance we're talking about with the pass from Murphy, you could tell He was absolutely fizzing with himself when he was losing the ball a couple of times. Again, you could see there was no hands in the end apology, but there was kind of a slap of his own chest sort of thing. So he knows that he's not doing the basics when he's got the ball at his feet right, and he's not doing the standard hit that we've come to know him that he can do. So, it will be one of those days where, he'll have a storm and, against Everton, he's probably going to bring the ball down in some wonderful way. But, the chance that he had on the turn, again, it shows he's got first touch because he brought it down wonderfully. But it's just, my fear is that in those areas where he is losing the ball, you're not always going to be able to get it back in. I mean, let's be honest, the times that City got the ball off Newcastle in a counter-attacking kind of style were from Newcastle United's own mistakes. They were giving the ball away. They were a bit careless in possession. I mean, we had Fabian Schär do a really silly flick when he should just put the ball on the touch. Now, thankfully, City were not at the top of their game. Manchester City, that are 100%, you're seeing at least 2 or 3 of those errors.
I don't think you make those mistakes at the Etihad and get away with it, to be honest.
I don't think you make them at St James' Park and get it with it if City was switched on.
Yeah.
Newcastle United were brilliant. Best performance of the season. But also, I think we've got to admit that City were well below where they should be and where they normally are. But, you've got to get a point from whoever's in front of you.
Well, I just hope Joe Linton is watching this at home or on his way back from training and he's heard the bag of cement comment and he's taken that very personally.
You know what
he's
doing,
ready to
right?
score a screamer.
He's at Benson. They've put away the football tennis tables, and he's just getting Bruno to kick the ball up into the air, and he's just bringing it down. They're going to do that 1,000 times until the sun goes down. And then Everton, we'll see him bringing the ball out the sky like nobody's business. Talking of Bruno, the captain, much better performance from him without really grabbing the headlines. And I talked about stats before and how Tonali's stats didn't really shout out at you, but actually, I'm sitting here saying Bruno didn't grab the headlines, but his stats are really impressive. 4 out of 4 dribbles, so he tops the list there. 2 interceptions, the most touches, 66, 50% of his duels won, 35 out of 45 passes completed, which is 81%, and 5 out of 7 of those long balls, which were really, really crucial to what Newcastle were trying to get against Manchester City. And of course, 1 key pass to Gordon for the penalty, which we'll get onto in a second. But I think it was a quiet but crucial afternoon for Bruno, and he really needed that sort of performance.
Much better from him. We spent quite a chunk of last week's podcast, didn't we, talking about where it's gone wrong with Bruno and, as the captaincy plagued him and all this sort of stuff. But these are the type of games that he thrives in, and there's a little bit of needle and there's a lot on the line when he's up against better players sometimes. But I thought Newcastle's midfield was fantastic, and that was because of how well he played, just sitting in behind and mopping everything up. And he needed that performance.
Do you think
really needed it?
Kieran Trippier playing and being another leader on the pitch, because we spoke about it last week, and have they got true captains within the squad when Trippier's not playing, when Lascelles is out injured? Have you got a proper captain in the good old sense of the word? Do you think him being on the pitch helps Bruno, takes the pressure off him a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. Look, Dan Burn and Kieran Trippier have played more so than not this season, so you can't really harp back to them not being in the team when Bruno struggled. But I think having those players around him will definitely take the burden off him, 100%, definitely. Trippier Trippier, as we said last week, is still probably more of a captain in the traditional sense than Bruno is. He's still more of a leader, isn't he, on the pitch? So
we're going to just jump into the comments here. Thank you to everyone who's watching live. Please do let us know in the comments what you thought about any of the performances on Saturday. If you're watching later or listening later, the email address is theaibwpodcast@reachpelsey.com. We do love to hear your thoughts. We've got David here saying, I watched the show before the game, Andrew, but I had to turn it off as I was worried enough. Love the Monday show. Favorite part of the week. Thanks, David. Gary says Trippier showed how valuable his experience is, even at 34. So I'm so pleased he's still here, which I think is the verdict of many people having watched Saturday. But yeah, good foundation for Bruno to build on. And again, it goes back to what I was saying at the start of the show. It's only a good performance if you can do that week in, week out. Now the penalty. Gordon, again, being forced to play up front because of an injury to Alexander Isak. But I was so happy for him on Saturday. He did his job. He got the goal. First things first, though. Was it a penalty?
I don't think it's a penalty, right? And I know people are going to come at me in the comments and they're going to be,
But just before you do, just got to remind you guys that Newcastle United legend Alan Shearer told Gary Lineker that he didn't think it was a penalty. So, if you're going to hit on someone, don't do it, Aaron.
Hit on Alan, not me. I don't think it's a penalty. Other people have said to me, well, there's contact. I don't see, and I might just not seen the right angle. I don't see where the contact is. I think Gordon goes round him, evades the contact, but then sort of kicks the ground and goes over. And I think because Edison has dived in, I'm trying to think of the word. He's committed. He hasn't taken any of the ball. I can see why it's given. I actually think the Joelinton one with Kyle Walker is probably more of a penalty. I also think I'm surprised VAR didn't look at the Fabian Schär one in the first half, where he seems to get just dragged to the floor by Guardiola. And I haven't seen a replay of it, but in real time, I thought Walker on Barnes was a penalty, but I've only seen that once, haven't seen a replay, so I don't know. So I think there was enough there to say Newcastle should have had at least one penalty. So they got one penalty, they scored it. But I think if that was at the other end and it was Haaland on Pope, I would be really annoyed that got given as a penalty.
Yeah, I think
I've got to be honest.
I agree. I think if it was the other way around, we probably would have a few complaints. I'm going to do the whole Aaron Stokes, and I'm kind of going to sit on the fence because I in real time, I didn't think it was a penalty. I thought he was going to boot him for diving.
Oh, yeah, I agree.
Because in my head, and look, I get it with the world of, like, well, a bit like we were saying before about Tonali being really cute with the fouls. This is what you've got to do. And I think you're right. Soon as Edison commits, Gordon knows what he's doing. If there's the slightest of contact is going down, it's going to be a penalty. I think it's a risk with VAR. But look, Edison's made his bed. He's committed.
Yeah,
he's nowhere near the ball. Yeah. Gordon's been really clever. He's knocked it around him. Now, he was saying on TNT that actually with VAR, he was thinking he was offside. And that played a part in what he was going to do with the ball, because he said, I probably would have just shot at Edison otherwise. So he's taken it around him. He'll say, I took it around him to put it around him and in the back of the net. I think he's taken it around him to then engage with the contact from the keeper. But Edison, like we say, once you've committed, you're always going to make the risk. And you go up top to the one that Pope did on Haaland later on in the game, where he's got full gloves to the ball and then he's wiped it out. And that's the difference. He's got to the ball first, whereas Edison just was nowhere near the ball, and there was contact. So there's contact, the keeper's committed. I think it probably is a penalty when you look at the rules of the game, but I can also understand why. From
you would be annoyed if that went against you. But like I say, I think there was enough there that Newcastle should have got at least one penalty in that game. There was a lot of incidences where you thought, City, you've maybe got a little bit lucky there. Very clever from Gordon to take it round him. The run from Gordon to time it like that was fantastic.
Beautiful pass.
Walker plays him offside. Walker plays him onside. Perfect ball from Bruno. And, Gordon had a long time to wait to take that penalty against, as you say, one of the world's best. A lot of pressure on his shoulders in terms of where the game's at.
I tell you what, when you see the camera angle from the spider camera, you don't half get a glimpse of just how difficult it is. Because I think often when you think about penalties, you think, the keeper's got no chance. I think as a goalkeeper, if you get asked, would you rather be the player taking the penalty or the goalkeeper? You go, well, I'd rather be the goalkeeper, because people don't expect you to save a penalty. But actually, with that angle, the goal's a lot smaller than you think. And it was, great from Gordon. He held his nerve. Beautiful penalty. We've got here Niall saying that Gordon doesn't have to jump over him, which is a fair point. Like I say, once the keeper's committed, he's done for. Gary says, penalty for me. If a goalie commits and doesn't touch the ball, any is a penalty. We should have had two for me. And also, if we had an instinctive striker playing, we would have won that game. And I do agree with you on that. And we'll get to that in a moment. Jay says the referee was awful the entire game. Grealish elbow was weak, but still an intentionally thrown elbow. And he was too scared to give us a second penalty because we just had one. And I can see where he's coming from with that as well. But I said, great finish on the spot. Never looked like missing. Runs over, hand cupped around the ear, then kissing the badge. He needed a performance like that, didn't he? There were so many players in the team that did, but I felt Gordon specifically needed to silence the doubters, needed to silence the critics, and he's done just that.
Yeah. Speaking of my tweets during the game, I tweeted that exact. When he scored, he needed that goal, not just a good performance. I think he needed to find the back of the net. I think as a whole, we saw Gordon's best performance of the season. I thought the pressing was on point. Absolutely nobody can turn around now, as they have been the last 4 or 5 weeks, and say he looked disinterested, because he looked very interested. fantastic from the front, fantastic with the ball. The runs in behind were fantastic. He was really causing problems for Diaz and Akanji. And, for him to get that goal after such a fantastic display pre-game, as he said after the game, I think it'll live with long in the memory for him.
Well, we're going to hear now from Eddie Howe about that display for Anthony Gordon put on by War Flags. Great display. But what I find more interesting about this clip from Eddie Howe is about showing love to Gordon. So let's hear from Howe first, Aaron, and then we'll hear your thoughts.
Yeah, again, brilliant from War Flags, brilliant from everybody. Anthony probably needed a bit of love today. Of course, it's difficult for me to love the players all the time. Sometimes you have to give them the opposite in order to get the right responses. But ultimately, I think it's really important that we love all our players and we allow them to enter the pitch in a great frame of mind, knowing that they're free to make the odd mistake, but they're playing in an environment where they feel protected and loved. And I think Anthony's got that. I think Anthony's got that through what he's done here. And today, again, you could see his commitment, and the crowd really could see how much effort he was putting into the game. And that's all we want to see, and me included. So brilliant from the supporters and a great response from Anthony.
Yeah, fantastic from War Flags. But what I found really interesting is I think Eddie Howe hints there that he's read Gordon the right act over the last week.
Yeah, saying I can't give them love all the time.
I think that to me suggests that he got him in a room and he said, your boy language has been off.
Yeah.
You've not been up to scratch. Like, tell me what's wrong. Let's have it out now. What's the issue here? Is it the new deal? Is it the new contract? I don't think it's any surprise that news of a new deal that came so quickly after the Fulham game, because I think they maybe have sat down and thought, well, let's just get it sorted. It's going to please everyone. You deserve it for last season. If that's what's the issue is, let's get it done. They probably had a word about the summer. Did you try and sell us? Didn't you? I think they probably had it out in terms of things off the pitch, but also the performances on the pitch. And look at the difference it made. But I certainly get from what Eddie Howe said there that he was not Anthony Gordon's best mate last week.
Yeah, and rightly so, to be honest, because a lot of people have turned around and said, well, if Anthony Gordon isn't given 100% because he wants a new deal or because he wants to go to Liverpool, then why should we support him? But actually, I think we saw on Saturday with a little arm on the shoulder in terms of the display from the fans, the backing that he's received. I think he just wants to feel loved at a club, and Eddie Howe can't tell that all the time, as he's just alluded to. But I was actually just thinking, as the display was happening before the game, I think there's very few players in that squad that would have got that solo display like he has. I think it's him. I think it's Bruno. There was a big one for Maxi. There's been the odd Isaac one.
I think more flags they are very good at reacting and sensing the mood. I think they're a very sensible bunch of men and women who run that group. And what I think they do is they can see some of the negative reaction on social media, but they're not jumping in both feet with onto the players. They're supporting everyone. They're closing the name. It's United, and I think they're very good at picking players up when they need it. You talk about the Maxi one. You talk about the Miggy one. You remember the Miggy one came after a lot of stick, and there again, Gordon on Saturday. I mean, that was meant for a game last season, but then he got himself sent off, so it couldn't happen, or he got himself suspended. So they've kind of saved it, but I think it's just come at the right time. They could have saved it for any game coming up, but that was the game that chose. I think it definitely made a difference. And it looks like Gordon's going to sign a new deal. Something that I wrote about last week. I think he deserves it. It protects Newcastle in the market. I mean, it's split opinion in my piece last week. I got a lot of people saying, well, he's got to earn it. It's not about what he can do, what he has done. It's about what he needs to do.
I've heard a lot of people, sorry to interrupt, just saying that exact thing. He's got to earn the new deal. He's got to earn the respect of the supporters again. If he's looking to sit us on the pitch, then
but he earned it last season.
Newcastle fans will quickly turn off, though. But I don't subscribe to the opinion that Anthony Gordon has looked disinterested. I don't think he's looked half as disinterested as people would have you believe on social media and whatnot. But I don't think it's as simple as, oh, well, look, he's earned it last season. Let's give him it. He has started the season poorly, and he needed a big performance to turn it around. Now, look, we've got to hope that this new deal is the catalyst. He's getting a big pay rise. He's getting better terms. He's extending his deal. All all that concern about Liverpool, all that speculation about Liverpool is going to finally get put to bed. This needs to be the catalyst for more good performance. And if he can continue playing like he did on Saturday, then happy days. What I will say is Anthony Gordon, start of the season on the left, has played on the right end, and I thought he did really well through the middle. I'm not going to bring it all up again about where his best position is, but how good is it to have a player who literally you can play anywhere in the three, even in midfield, and I don't think really it affects his game too much.
Look, it doesn't really matter because they got points. But I agree with one of the comments I've already got. I think Gary was the one who put it in. He said, if you've got an instinctive striker, I think you win that game because, again, like I think it was against Fulham, there was a ball across the box and you're just thinking, if you've got an instinctive striker, someone who's gambling, someone who knows where they need to be, that's in the back of the net. I don't know where Gordon was at that point. I think he was somewhere on the edge of the box. It was a Murphy one from the right in the second half. But there was a moment in the first half where he's come out to get the ball and he's on the right. He's in Trippier's position and he's looking to cross. But there's no one there. And then the midfield have got to come in. But because of where they are, they're a bit late in the box. And by that time, City then get reorganised.
We see Isak do that all the time.
Yeah, but
Isak drops deep and picks the ball up all the time. So it's not just a Gordon problem.
It's not. But
I think the bigger point is you will never, ever subscribe to the fact that Gordon is a centre forward. He's
not a centre forward.
Well, no, I don't think you'll ever subscribe to the fact that he can play there consistently. I don't
think he can.
I think he can, and I think he proved it on Saturday. I thought he was brilliant Saturday. His runs in behind were fantastic.
I'm not denying that he wasn't brilliant on Saturday. I thought he was really good, but I don't think it's sustainable going forward. That's what we have to hope that Isak is back. It looks like he's probably going to be back after the international break. But for me, Gordon's still better on either wing.
Of course he is. I'm not saying he's not, but I'm saying is I've got no qualms and I've never had any qualms with sticking him through the middle. It's not ideal. I'm not saying he needs to play there over Isak. I'm not saying he's better through the middle, but I think you underestimate how good Gordon is going through the middle.
No, I don't. I think he knows how to hold the runs and hold the line and make them runs, but when it comes down to being that instinctive striker in the box and being ready to jump on anything that comes across, I think that's what lets him down when it comes to being a striker. And this is Newcastle United going for the top four. We should not even be talking about this. There was no way that we should be talking about Eddie Howe having to play Anthony Gordon up front for a sustained period of time. It just should not be a topic.
We shouldn't be talking about it because I feel like I'm in Groundhog Day right now because we've been having the same conversation. It's my own stupid fault for bringing it up right now, but we've been having this conversation for seasons. I agree we shouldn't be having it because their recruitment should have been different. You can have a larger debate about William Masula and that signing, but
can we talk about Liam Delap?
I'm surprised it's taken us 42 minutes to get on to Liam Delap.
I'm not saying I know a thing or two, but
well, just for you wouldn't know, apart from the 2 texts you sent me, the fact you've mentioned it in the office, and the 2 tweets that you've put out in the last 24 hours, that you might have been a fan of Liam Delap in the summer.
Look,
now of Ipswich fame,
he scored a few goals, 3 goals, and it's only the start of the season. You might dry up after the game against who was it against in the end? I was just concentrate on the goals against Aston Villa. Actually, yeah, my father-in-law was up and he was fuming because he's a Villa fan. He was watching it. We were driving in the car, me and my little girl, and I had the radio on. Grandpa was at home, but I had the radio on in the car, and she's singing along, and then all of a sudden she hears the goal go in, the first goal by Liam, and Dad, she can hear the applause, and she's just started learning to clap. She's clapping away. Told her grandpa he wasn't best pleased, but yeah, I think he looks like a real talent, and it's funny we haven't really seen enough of William Masula, but there's only I think a year's difference in them, if that, and £5 million or so in the price tag.
Yeah.
For me, if I'd had the chance, I would have gone for Liam Delap over William Masula. You watch Delap. I watched the second half in particular against Villa. He looks strong. He looks pacey. Good control. He looks confident. He looks like a bargain, if we're being totally honest. And I think City got various clauses in the deal. I still think he would have been ideal for Newcastle United.
Yeah, I mean, I'll admit I'm surprised at how well he's done in the Prem so far. But I don't think I can really disagree with anything you said. And as you say, I didn't realise actually until yesterday when I was watching the Villa game that he was actually 20 million. But it's just another one off City's conveyor belt, isn't it? I mean, another one, just like Cole Palmer, that they might regret selling. He looks good. He looks really good, Liam Delap. Liam Delap, yeah. Sorry, I was going to call him Rory Delap, yeah.
Yeah, it looks like a beautiful goal for the equaliser. But I think just while we were on mentioning players that we tipped to join Newcastle United that I got a bit of stick for, the other one was Brian Mbeumo. Less stick than I got for the Liam Delap shout. But again, the season
looks
he's
good.
had, we're talking about the right wing and it's Jacob Murphy or it's Miguel Almiron, Anthony Gordon perhaps. But wouldn't it be nice to have that question alongside the options? Is it Anthony Gordon on the right or is it Brian Mbeumo? Or could it be Anthony Gordon on the right and Brian Mbeumo up front?
Yeah, potentially. I mean, yeah, look, Brian Mbeumo, I'm really, really surprised that he stayed at Brentford in the summer. He came out, before the window had even opened and said, I'm ready for a new challenge. And for whatever reason, whether it was a lack of interest, whether it was Brentford holding out, they've managed to keep hold of him. And I mean, he's had some start of the season, hasn't he?
2 beautiful goals in the last couple of weeks. They're starting really quickly, but he's a good player. And I think maybe Newcastle need to consider that one in the next couple of transfer windows. Just on Gordon's imminent deal, I think what it does, it sends out a big message to the likes of Bruno, to the likes of Isak, who've seen Newcastle United sign no one in the last couple of windows. But what this does, it shows them that Newcastle United are serious and more important, can keep their best players. And it sends out a big message.
It does. And I think more than anything, it finally puts to bed this lingering speculation that's been ongoing about Gordon having his head turned, Gordon being Liverpool bound in January or next summer. And as we've already touched on, hopefully, it gives them a little boost that is going to benefit Newcastle on the pitch as well as off the pitch. Look, for all we can lament the summer that was, and we don't need to go over all ground in terms of how poor it was in terms of recruitment, they've responded well because tying Anthony Gordon down is fantastic. Alexander Isak with a new deal is around the corner as well. They've still got a lot of work to do in terms of the players that are out of contract next season, but they've responded this summer well in terms of what they can do between now and January.
Yeah, most certainly so. Shez says, the media were wrong about Eddie not being able to put his favourites under the cosh, talking about there the clip I played of Eddie Howe talking about Anthony Gordon. Gary says Gordon's a young lad, gets called up for the Euros and that's sitting on the bench frustrated. Also finds out that someone, whoever at the club, sent feelers out to Liverpool. Wouldn't that affect you? I think most certainly would. We've got someone saying he had an incredible, frustrating summer that also impacted his pre-season. He said himself he's not quite at full fitness and has been asked to play out of position many times, often thanklessly. He has said there that he's about 90%. He's getting close to full fitness, so can't wait to see what he can do when he is fully fit and ready. Johnny says the lack of strikers is on the club, not Anthony Gordon. They took a risk only bringing in a Sulak. Gordon has saved the draw for us. He needs praise. Look, he did fantastic, and so that's not the point I was making. It's about a more bigger picture kind of point. Niall asks a really interesting question here, which I have seen put to people on social media. I'm going to urge you, Aaron, not to sit on the fence for this one, okay?
Hey,
never.
I'm
not going to urge you not to sit on the fence because
there's only one of us that's sat on the fence today. And it's not me,
but
so
usually it's you because this is a question that's going to need an answer, right? Niall says, I'm going to throw this out there. Did you not think we looked way more balanced as a team without Alexander Isak?
Did we look more balanced? I mean, it was a very, very balanced Newcastle United display. So, yeah, maybe we did, but it doesn't matter because, Alexander
because
Isak.
You don't drop arguably the second best Premier League.
Exactly. So, I mean, Alexander Isak, when he's fit, is going to come back into the team. I mean, I'm sure Niall isn't doing this with his question, but I'm sure nobody's going to make the argument that Alexander Isak needs to sell the team. I don't know. Look, I think Newcastle are very balanced with Alexander Isak in the team, but he hasn't been at the races this season. And he's been dropping deep and he's been losing the ball, when he's been coming to get it. So maybe we're just, I mean, they did look very balanced on Saturday. But as you say, they need to be balanced against Everton and, so forth.
And as someone's mentioned here, it's probably more to do with the midfield as well.
I mean, just on that, I mean, that midfield against Fulham, was a shambles, really. It was an absolute disgrace. They were so easily overrun. And if any team in the league is going to overrun you, it's Manchester City. Even without Kevin De Bruyne, even without Phil Foden or Rodri, that midfield three of Gundogan, Kovacic and Lewis is still fantastically so good. But, Newcastle matched them and more.
We've got Jay saying, we spoke about Harvey Barnes. Before he came, Leicester fans said they love him, but if he isn't scoring, you tend not to notice him in games. Do we persist or just make it clear he's an impact sub?
I think, how many times on this pod have we said, games will pass him by. If he's not scoring or he's not getting assists, there's very little he does. And I think for someone who's had such a good season or such a good start of the season, Saturday was probably his quietest performance. Didn't really affect the game too much. So yeah, I agree with the comment. I think if he's not scoring any goals or getting any assists, which is a great talent to have, I don't think he offers you too much. I think it's something we've been saying for a while.
Well, my man of the match on Saturday was Jacob Murphy. I thought he was absolutely brilliant. I thought he had the direct running that we needed. I thought he was pacey. I thought his decision making was spot on. And some people have said it wasn't, but actually I can think of 2 or 3 opportunities where he's created or put Newcastle in a really dangerous position going forward, which on another day they might get another goal. But Barnes, I couldn't really think of anything Barnes really did. So maybe that does go towards Jay's point and the point you've made in weeks prior. But look, Barnes is scoring goals. So that's what that's the only thing he can do.
Exactly.
I'm not complaining. But I
have.
did think Murphy for me was the star man. And I know you were impressed with Dan Burn, as was I. Fabian Schär as well. But for me, Murphy gets my man of the match.
So yeah, I'm surprised. You're the only person that I've heard say that about Murphy, but I think he had a really good game. My man of the match was Lewis Hall. I thought he was so much better than we've seen, both going forward and defensively. I mean, he kept Bernardo Silva so quiet. On Saturday night, we put the poll in our Newcastle United WhatsApp for our followers to answer. The question was, who was man of the match? Lewis Hall, Tonali, Gordon, Dan Burn, or anyone else? And the results are crystal clear. Anthony Gordon, I think we had 800 votes in total, and Anthony Gordon's got 600 of them.
That's a Sky Sports vote, that though, isn't it? They always go for the goal scorer.
Well, without Anthony Gordon, to take him out of the equation, Lewis Hall had 118, Sandro Tonali had 107, Dan Burn had 60, and there was 75 votes for other. So
I mean, Dan Burn was absolutely
fantastic.
colossal. I mean, he was up for the fight against Erling Haaland. He was not going to let him get it. We didn't let him get a moment's freedom, and Haaland just couldn't handle it.
One time where Haaland left him on his backside on the halfway line, but he recovered well. And apart from that, I mean, Haaland hardly had a sniff, and he was really, really frustrated at the end of the game, kicking the ground, puffing his chest out.
Big performance by
from him.
both him and Fabian Schär. Now, we just want to talk quickly about the press. Gordon was key to that, chasing down Edison a couple of times. What was really interesting, though, about the press is that I didn't feel the same press that we saw a couple of seasons back, where it was relentless. It was like every single time the opposition had the ball, Newcastle were on you. This time, I think it was more, well, it was back and forth between being a press and then just sitting back a little bit and inviting City on and then trying to block them off that way, it was refreshing to see Newcastle being able to adapt in game.
It was what, sorry?
Refreshing. Because usually you have teams that either they press you and press you and press you, and that's all they've got, and that's their only game plan. Or you have teams that will part the bus and try and absorb it, then hit you on the counter. And with Newcastle, you had a little bit of both. I think they realised they couldn't spend 90 minutes trying to press Man City because eventually they will just pass around you. So I thought the game plan was spot on.
I think the press, where I noticed it most, was actually in the middle of the park. The midfield press was ridiculous. They give no time to Kovacic, who we know can just pick a pass all day. Every time there was a loose ball in the middle of the park, Newcastle were winning it. They were getting the second balls. I think actually that was where the press was coming into it. We saw Gordon a few times chasing down. We even saw Dan Burn at one point chasing down Edison. But I agree, it wasn't that sort of, okay, every time City you're playing up from the back, we're going to go forward. It was a very measured press. They got it spot on. They got the game plan absolutely spot on against Manchester City.
I have to say, though, I mean, that moment that Dan Burn was high up the field pressing, I mean, they got the ball back, so it worked.
I can't remember what had happened before.
It must have been a corner free kick.
Dan Burn had to be up that far up the pitch anyway. There's no way he was just that far.
You don't always want your left back or your centre back, running around a bit aimlessly. I mean, it worked in the end.
Pressured Edison well.
I mean, they had the chance to win the game, didn't they? Newcastle United. We had a Longstaff dragging in a shot wide,
which forced a good save as well.
A little dink. Didn't quite get over. They were very unlucky not to get all 3 points, I thought.
Yeah, they could have won it. I think on the balance of play, they probably should have won it. I think they were the better team on the day. And like you say, there was chances at the end that went begging. They rode their luck a little bit as well, or maybe not rode their luck, but Nick Pope had to be on his A game. Fantastic stuff from Bernardo Silva.
But it was always going to be something like that, because I never felt, even when City went 1-up, I was never worried about them running away with it. Despite my fears pre-game, I wasn't worried. And when Newcastle got the equaliser, it felt like Newcastle United were really the only side that were going to do something and win the game. And if City were going to do it, it was going to be either Newcastle United mistake, they're going to get the ball in a silly area, or it was going to be an absolute moment of magic. And Silva very nearly created with that wonderful turn and hit on the volley, which forced Pope in a fantastic save. But yeah, I just felt Newcastle looked really, really comfortable.
Yeah, they did. They did. And as we touched on at the top of the show, a performance that no one was really expecting, given the games that have gone before, given the quality of opposition. But as you say, and as you rightly say, it's worthless if they don't back it up with Everton.
Certainly is. Shall we hear from Pep Guardiola now? Yes, because please. He was wonderfully praiseful. Is that a word? Praiseful? That is a word, isn't it? Of Eddie Howe. Let's hear from Pep.
Listen, I have a lot of, but for many years I'm here. He's many years as well. So Bournemouth and the other one. So I said to him how I admire him for the way he approached the game, and first in a high pressing. It's a team is so direct, so they have a lot of legs with Murphy. He's actually as well, Gordon, Barnes. So we control them really, really well in most of part of the game, especially when we play so high. Bruno and Joelinton and the physicality, Tonali, and after the central defender so high. It's a so difficult team. So we know when Newcastle last season struggled a bit for just one reason, for a lot of injuries that they had. Otherwise, the team will compete really well. And when you are a manager for many years, a lot of times, and it's never created problems. The press conference always polite for the opponents, like we try to do as a club. So why should not be? So I admit that we would like to win, we draw, they deserve as well. So, and we take the point both.
Now, that clip has gone absolutely viral after I tweeted on Saturday. Newcastle fans loving the fact that Pep Guardiola was so respectful to Eddie Howe and so respectful to Newcastle. And I tweeted it was really nice to see a man of his standing with everything that he's got on his plate, wanting to win the Premier League title, expected to win another Premier League title, that he's taken the game in a really good manner. Newcastle United were good. He can admit that. He admits a point was probably a fair result. Fans of other teams have jumped on the bandwagon or jumped on me and said, well, actually, he's always like this. He's a very respectful guy. And when you really look at it, he's digging out a certain rival manager. We'll not name him, but I can see where they're coming from. That's kind of what I was getting out of my tweet, that other managers would not have been happy drawing at Newcastle United, despite the performance that the Magpies put in. What did you make of Pep? Has he been genuine in his praise for Newcastle United, or is it a kind of mind games elsewhere?
No, I think he generally is very, very... I think he's got a real soft spot for Newcastle, and maybe it's because he tried to sign for them all those years ago under Bobby Robson, but also I think he does clearly have a very, very high level of respect for Eddie Howe. He's spoken numerous occasions about Newcastle being potential title contenders down the road. He always dreads coming to St James's Park. He called it an incredible place just a couple of days ago, and it was noticeable. There was a really long chat, or a much longer chat than opposing managers usually have at the end of the game, where Eddie Howe shared a few words with Pep Guardiola, which he was asked about in the press conference, and he basically just said that he has so much respect for the club and the manager.
Well, if you get to see that press conference and when he's asked that question, what I love about it, his face doesn't crack at all. There's no big grin, there's no big smile. If someone says to you, Pep Guardiola has praised you, he said he might. Most managers would be smiling from cheek to cheek. I can think of certain former Newcastle managers who would probably get it on a t-shirt and wear it at the next press conference going, but not Eddie Howe, because it's not about praise from other managers. It's about how you build on the performance in front of you. And yeah, probably behind closed doors, when the cameras aren't there, he's probably, over the moon that Pep said that. But right there in that moment, it's not inflating his ego at all, which is really nice to see. Just on Alexander Isak, he won't feature against the FC Wimbledon. Anyhow, was asked about him in the press conference. I just want to get your thoughts on this quote. He talked about him playing through the pain at Fulham. He said it was one of those situations where if Alex could tolerate the pain, he would be fine. He tolerated the pain for 80 minutes at Fulham before he became aware of any feeling back in that toe. It was either he'd be out until probably after the international break initially, or he could carry on playing as normal if he could tolerate the feelings and the effects of the injury. He hasn't been able to do that, so we're back to the original diagnosis. I think assessing him on a day-to-day basis, because there was a chance he could be fit for Everton if everything falls into place. Of course, then we have a decision to make. Does he play in that game, or do we leave him knowing that it'll be okay 2 weeks afterwards? I mean, what do you make of it? I mean,
I think that is Eddie Howe saying, don't expect to see him at Brighton.
but therefore, was it a risk playing him against Fulham? I mean, we're going back to the point, aren't we?
I think it was always a risk play. That we knew pre-Fulham that he was.
But that's the
suffering with a
point.
broken toe.
Eddie Howe shouldn't have been left in that position, right?
Well, yeah, of course he shouldn't. But we've been speaking about that for 6 months. Of course he shouldn't. But I think, or I wonder whether Gordon's performance on Saturdays maybe eased the pressure to play Isak against Everton, because he's seen Gordon do it. Gordon's maybe, going into that game on the back of a good, solid performance at home. You never know. Will Asula might bag a hat-trick against Wimbledon, and he might spot at Goodison Park. So I think the Howe quotes are saying don't expect to see Isak until post-international break.
You mentioned Wilson there. What do you think is going to have to happen in
Did I mention
January?
Wilson?
You did, because he's injured, because he can't play him.
I didn't mention Wilson.
Okay, well, I've just read. I've read it. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
I was trying to.
I
Anyway,
just said Will Asula.
well, it goes back to, though, doesn't it? Not having Wilson available to fill in for Isak and what have you. Now, it's a lot easier said than done to sell him cash in. I think Newcastle United have just got to accept you're going to have to take a loss on him. You're not going to get what you would get if he was fit, because it's just a gamble. No club are going to pay 15, 20 million for him because they can't guarantee his fitness. I just don't think Newcastle can get to the end of the season gambling on Isak, Wilson, Sula, and Gordon. I just don't think that's a situation we want Newcastle United to find themselves in.
So what do you think they do? Sell Wilson in January and sign someone else?
Yeah, I think if you put it out there that he's available for 7 to 10 million pounds, which is severely undercutting what you could get for a fit Callum Wilson, I think you just cash in and you take the hit. You put it towards getting someone in who can play the majority of games. I mean, look, we all turned our noses up with Dominic Calvert-Lewin, but he seems to have overcome everything. And if Newcastle can go there and get a 35 million pound deal from something like that, I know, but if
really 35,
are you?
Is that the answer?
Well,
35 million of your best British pounds on DCL.
If he has not gone down with injury by the time we get to January, then you probably say he's overcome the injuries that had affected him. He's a very
I'm sorry. I'll never get him. He could score 50 goals this season.
He could score 50 goals this season, and you wouldn't.
He could score 15 goals this season, and I still don't think I'd be wanting to pay 35 million for him. No, I mean Newcastle could do so much better than that.
Okay, then another striker. Pick one out of the air.
Well, I don't know. You've put us on the spot, so I don't know. But look, going back to the original question, Newcastle thought Callum Wilson would be back by now. The fact he's not is so predictable. It's also so frustrating. Will they cash in? I mean, I get your point. I think a lot of fans will get your point. I think that's the general consensus now, is that his time is coming to an end. He's too unreliable. Does Eddie Howe see it that way? I don't know.
Well, remains to be seen. And just on William Asula, just quickly, because it is the AFC Wimbledon game tomorrow at St James's Park, which, of course, was going to be played down at Plough Lane last week, but the flooding and what have you. Eddie Howe has hinted quite strongly that Asula and Almiron will play.
Got to play him.
Yeah.
And
Miggy?
Asula. Yeah, both of them.
So on Asula, he says, we were well aware that we'd have to go to work as coaches, and Will would have to go to work as the player to develop himself, to improve every area of his game to become a Premier League striker. We feel he has the attributes to do that. He's very, very quick, physically excellent. He's tall, imposing, and his best asset is running in behind and stretching the line for us. He has some things to smoothen out in his game. We've seen already, certainly from the battles he's had against our centre-halves in training, his ability to score goals and have a physical impact in the game to make it uncomfortable for defenders. He has to start, doesn't he? I mean, Eddie Howe, very, very praiseful from. Of course, he's never going to come out and say anything other than nice words about him. But his time,
got to start him.
Yeah,
no questions about it. Got to throw him in from the outset. I mean, that, this is a player who Eddie Howe and Jason Tyndall clearly think is, a Premier League player in waiting. You're not going to start him against the League Two side. When are you going to start him? You've got to play him on Tuesday.
What's the rest of your team looking like?
Is this the team I would pick or the team I think Eddie Howe's going to pick?
Team you'd pick, and then we'll jump into the team here. Eddie Howe will pick.
The team I would pick is Martin Dubravka, but also if Nick Pope starts, I'm quite happy with that as well. I think I would go with Tino, Emil Kraft, Dan Burn, and Lloyd Kelly. Then I would go Joelinton, Willock, Longstaff, and I would go Harvey Barnes, Miguel Almiron, and Willie Masula. But I'd also be happy to see Sanusi over Barnes.
My team would be Dubravka, Pope, Kraft, Lloyd Kelly, Lewis Hall. Big Joe is the holding as kind of midfielder. Longstaff, Willock, Miggy, Sanusi, Masula. The only one I'm doubtful on, I could see Kelly at left back. I could see. I'm not totally writing Alex Murphy off from not featuring at some point as well. But I could. Will he play Sanusi? I think Sanusi's probably the most likely of the youngsters to start, but it's whether.
I hope we see Sanusi. I think tomorrow would be a really good game to start him in at home, decent opposition, and I think fans want to see him as well.
Did I say Dubravka and Pope? So I think I said. Apparently, I said.
I'm not sure.
Well, Dubravka. Sorry, I don't think I said Pope. People in the comments saying Dubravka and Pope. It'd be Dubravka for me on Tuesday, not Pope. Another chance to showcase Fort St James's Park. They haven't been beaten since Man City back in January. This is the game that, with all due respect, they have to win.
I mean, much easier task now that it's at home rather than down at the Cherry Red Record Stadium, which we didn't talk about last week. It's a great name for a stadium. That might just be my personal. Yeah, like that.
Okay.
Cherry Red Records. It's just good to have a cup game at St James's Park, and I know they've obviously got Chelsea in the next round if they get through. Should they get through? But this is a game Newcastle should be winning. They've got to win tomorrow. It's a complete banana skin, but I think they get through it.
Yeah, fingers crossed they do. Right, quickly then, we're going to finish with 20 questions.
Oh yeah, God, I forgot about this, but
you ready?
Bring it on. Yep, I'm ready.
Right, I don't think I've seen our quizmaster in the comments this week, so you can't get it within 2 questions. Thankfully, this time around. It was unbelievable, wasn't it? Graham last week getting that within 2 questions. But go on, fire away.
Is this player British?
Yes. British player. Question 1.
So my next question, I feel like the last 2 you've gone for have been the same era, and I think you might have gone for a similar era. So did they play for Newcastle pre-2010?
They did.
See, I just know how your mind works now that we've done this a couple of weeks. Did this player play under Sir Bobby Robson?
They did not. So I have an English player pre-2010 who did not play under Sir Bobby Robson.
Is this player a defensive player?
Yes. What's that? 4th question?
That's
there?
number 4.
That's 4th question.
British defender pre-2010, but after Sir Bobby.
No. What your question was? Did he play under Sir Bobby?
Oh, so he didn't. Also, he was pre-Bobby then.
Might be.
Yeah, that's so you've just given it away there. Okay, so he's pre-Bobby. Is he a local lad?
He's not.
Would he be described as a hero/legend?
Yes.
Does he currently reside in America?
He does not.
Okay.
It's not Warren Barton. He did play for Sir Bobby though.
Of course, yeah. I was going too late there. Right, so what did I ask there? Not local and America.
Got people saying Demba Bob, Batty, Howe, Beresford, Mike Williamson, Beresford, another one, Colaccini. I mean, some guesses there right over the shop. It's none of these guys that you've just mentioned there. So pre-2010, pre-Sir Bobby, English defender, cult hero.
Play under Keegan.
Yes. Silence.
Yeah,
the concentration.
This is a tricky
focus.
because you've gone before I was born. So
Howie.
Steve Howie.
He's been mentioned in the comments.
Just when you said Howie there, I
I was
thought
saying
that was a subliminal
I can't
clue.
even pick players post 96 or 97 whenever you
Right.
decided you were going to come onto this
See,
planet.
the thing that's thrown is
We have got one right guess in the comments to coin a phrase.
see a centre back.
Yes. So we had a few shouts for Peacock. It's not Darren Peacock, but we have got one right guess.
So it's not Peacock, it's not Howie, it's not Barton. Is it Steve Watson?
It's not Steve Watson. It's not Barry Venison either.
Is this player often seen back in Newcastle?
Yes. He's on the good old corporate
Yeah,
survey.
that's exactly what I was thinking. So who have you mentioned to me that you've had in your box the last couple of?
He's
You
never
haven't had him.
been my guest, but he's been in the games quite a few times as a guest of other boxes.
Did he play for other Prem clubs?
I don't think so. I'm going to just double check. At the time he was bought.
This is a
No.
stinker, this one.
Actually, when did Swindon go down? Swindon go down potentially? No, I'm going to say no. Oh, no, yeah, he briefly played for Swindon Town in the Premier League, 93-94. Tall, ponytail. He's got a very, very fantastic name. He probably, at the time, people would joke you wouldn't want to meet him down in dark alley.
Yeah,
You
he's,
cross the road to avoid him.
It's
Come
you
on.
know, you need to see someone's face.
Do you want the initials to help you
Yeah.
out? BK.
Or Brian
Kilcline.
Kincline.
There we go, ladies and gents. Brian Kilcline. After Aaron's height of last week's 20 questions, he is falling like
I think
a
we need
rock.
to swap it round again so that we're taking it in turns.
All right.
'cause
Do you know what? Are you here next week off
I
Gallivanting?
am here next week.
Right, next
as
week you can
always.
do 20, as always. You can do 20 questions. Ian there, my uncle in the comments has got it right. Killer Kilcline, he says. Yeah, a lot of people are getting it right eventually, unlike Aaron here. But thank you very much, guys, for tuning in. It is much appreciated. Do head over to chroniclelive.co.uk where you will see everything any hour to say about the visit of AFC Wimbledon for tomorrow's League Cup clash. We will have a YouTube verdict on the game tomorrow. We'll also have Aaron's podcast as well, straight after the final whistle. And me and Simon Bird will be back on Wednesday for a bit more of an in-depth chat about Tuesday night. John Gibson will be back on Thursday, and we'll have a view from the opposition on Friday ahead of that Everton game. So thank you very much, guys, for tuning in as always. And for myself and Aaron, we will see you on Monday.